Good afternoon and welcome in to the SCC. We are in Europe. It is the beginning of phase 2 for them as well. And it's mentioned aggro. They're going to be trying to break it all down for you today. And if you happen to miss it, we're going to be watching two teams here who have some familiar names for you, but have not had similar trajectories. Belt Slap and Freshly Forged. And right now, aggro, Belt Slap kind of look like untouchable, I think is the best way to say it.
Yeah, they played a bunch in Phase 1, as all teams did. They'd lost exactly one game, and that was in the finals to the Snake Pit of the playoffs. Look, this Belt Slap team, until someone proves otherwise, is uncontested the best team in the region. Now, Cold Llamas did get a lot better going from Phase 1 to Phase 2. They get Pretty Prime and Fails to actually join that roster, but that leaves Freshly Forged kind of in limbo now. We are going to see Deathwalker's return to competitive Smite. He's playing here today. And still have Ice, still have Kalas, but the rest of that roster not quite as star-studded as it once was.
That's right. They could be in a little bit of trouble here. Mr. Crunchy, I think, on this roster, Okeanos as well. These are players I'm not as familiar with, but certainly still ones that could facilitate around a strong roster, right? If you've got Deathwalker, Ice, and Kalas on your team, then certainly you're starting from a pretty good core. It's just a question of how those players can kind of function around them. Only problem is your first day in the gym, you don't want to be lifting this kind of weight, and that's what Belt Slap are, right? They're going to be about the heaviest thing you could try and take care of in that first set for this Freshly Forged roster. So even if this maybe isn't their best day, I don't think that necessarily is indicative of how things will look for this team going forward.
No, it's certainly a tough draw to start off the new roster up against Belt Slap, who is the best challenger circuit team in either region. I mean, Bastion and the boys look very good in North America, but no one has ever looked close to how good Belt Slap has been. So we'll see if they can continue that here in Phase 2. You know, the crown rests lightly on their head for now, but got to keep on earning it as you progress through the weeks.
That's right. Anyone can grab it at any point. Let's go ahead and get into those picks in bands then for game number 1. It is a best of 3 here in the SCC, as it is in most of our formats. So we'll get a couple of cracks at this to see exactly how you take down Belt Slap. No one has really been able to show me how to consistently do that yet. I'm wondering if maybe though it starts with Johnny. I mean, normally back last year, he was the leading man, right, on a roster that really depended on him. But this time, he's kind of another piece of a really strong machine. Do you still think that he's that important that maybe you can kind of break that up a little bit, or is he too flexible to ban out?
Yeah, I think that he still goes with that same sort of play style, but he certainly expanded the God pool this year in comparison to years past, which is what you expect from a player who's on the trajectory that Johnny is one of the premier junglers that has a chance to be into the SPL for sure. I think that overall, when I've seen Belt Slap struggle, it's been when teams are able to successfully pressure Arkil and Trix Tank in that duo lane and get early leads over there. So if I'm on Freshly Forged, I think that's where I'm really trying to lean. But maybe with their 3v3 core, you know, Deathwalker's playing mid, not solo. You've got Ice, Kalas, and Deathwalker in your 3v3 in mid. Wouldn't be surprised to see them try and prioritize those sorts of picks and really just go into the comfort zone for those 3 guys who have played together for so long.
It makes sense, right? I think you're trying to facilitate that group. On paper, likely the strongest element of it. We can't say for sure how some of these other guys might end up eventually playing, but right now, that's where I'm putting all my eggs, right? I'm putting it in the basket of that 3v3 if I'm on the side of Freshly Forged. Looks like Kuzenbo going to be taken here first overall. I mean, Kuzenbo has some strength. He's certainly one on your roster, but I think first pick overall, a bit of a reach for this guy.
Agreed. Yeah, hard agree on that one. I don't know. I just don't see a reason to really ever first pick Kuzenbo in this current meta. But, I mean, if you're going to prioritize a 3v3 in mid, you get Kalas on something that's annoying. Johnny likes to play a lot of auto-attack-centric characters, the Bakasura and stuff like that. Kuzenbo is kind of insurance against picks like Kali as well. You just don't want to show what you want later on in the draft, I suppose, so you go with the first pick, Kuzenbo. But Belt Slap gets some pretty strong picks of their own with the Tyr and the Chernobog, so feel like Freshly Forged kind of just playing the waiting game on what they wanted to pick first.
And they'll continue to go with relatively sort of safe and not revealing with the Hachiman right afterwards, right? That doesn't give away a whole lot about what you want to do. And now the King Arthur here as well. So a nice front line established between the Kuzenbo and the King Arthur. Not necessarily a peel-oriented front line for them. This feels a bit more dive-heavy. That's why I like this Hachiman. But what do you think about these first 2 picks here? Does it give you any idea of what Freshly Forged want to do, or is it just looking kind of generic?
No, they're just trying to smite game, man. I mean, they're out here on the battleground of the gods doing their best, I suppose. I mean, none of these picks really lean into one particular style. Dive certainly works pretty well for Kuzenbo, but he also peels a lot better than he used to. So I think that Freshly Forged are still pretty ambiguous in their draft so far.
It'll be a Camazotz coming through from Belt Slap, and that is not ambiguous. That is a ton of damage potential that you can't really do a whole lot to peel, regardless of who you select for your front line. That Bat out of Hell damage is just going to be happening. And with the tier already selected, I'm wondering if this might be a jungle Camazotz. I mean, tier could go support. Trixtank could always play that, but this kind of looks like a Camazotz jungle to me.
I agree, and I think that it fits Johnny's playstyle. I mean, I think we've seen him play it before, if memory serves properly, and it's just a pick that brings a lot of damage in that mid to late game, and in the early game you can snowball with it. It's exactly what Johnny wants to do, be this disruptive 1v1 style of character. No one's out sustaining a Camazotz in the middle of a team fight. No one is able to run away from a Camazotz effectively. Even someone like Hachiman on the horse, you can get swooped right off that horse pretty easily by that Bat out of Hell. Feel like this is the style of pick that Johnny wanted.
Well, no Merlin valued to this point. I'm a bit surprised. We talk all the time about how his value has kind of gone down lately, but he still gets prioritized by the likes of Shinto and other mid lane mages, but not here in the SEC. Also worth noting that Johnny did not elect to go with those auto attack assassins, which has been kind of his main style. He likes those hyper carries like the Kali or Baka, but those were available and he chose not to pick them too. So Belt Slap, I think, kind of moving away from what we might have normally expected from them and still showing that they could be scary with some other picks.
Yeah, I mean, no Merlin, but Raijin is like the other god that everyone's prioritizing right now in mid. It's really between those two and then some Discordia on top of that. Love the Kumbhakarna pick here against the Kali. As soon as she starts using that ultimate, you think you can't do anything to peel her. Well, you mez her for 3 seconds, or you epic uppercut her, and she's just out of that fight instantly. I think this Kumbhakarna pick is really solid. Belt Slap have a great balance of really, really good damage and strong CC on top of that. I think they came away with a pretty strong draft here in game one.
They did. It's a bit scary what Belt Slap have for them. But look on the other side for Freshly Forged. They've got this Isis, and then between the Kali and the Hachiman, some good ability to burn some objectives. I wonder if maybe that could be the idea here from Freshly Forged, to be a bit more of an objective-focused composition between the burn and that confirmation.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, that's what Isis does best. But I think Isis is... The objective is important for sure, but she's really there to be your CC bot in the midst of team fights. I mean, she's there to really disrupt this front line, and that's why this Kumbhakarna pick is really smart as well, not just against Isis Kali, but also because it's really, really hard to lock down Kumbhakarna, even with Isis level CC. Now that you have this full 3-on-3 in mid, I think that Freshly Forged really has a pretty good opportunity to kill tanks, but you look at the tanks they're trying to kill on the other side, it's Julio, who's on tier, who, I don't know if Julio's going to go movement speed build, because Julio's been playing tier forever, even when other people weren't, so he might go with something a little bit more traditional. And then you've got Trixtank on a very, very mobile Kumbhakarna that's hard to lock down. I just think that Belt Slap drafted frontline that's very good against what Freshly Forged want to do, which is displace you with the Kuzenbo and then lock you down with the Isis CC.
Should be able to survive that in most cases. Things looking fairly standard to start with here so far in this game. Could be a little trouble for Isis, though, as Johnny's already found some decent poke onto it, but not going to be able to keep up the chase much longer than that. But it looks like Trixtank is the one that's actually in trouble. Pushed back into the minion wave and procced the passive. Not going to do him any good here. Freshly Forged, finding first blood here over Belt Slap.
And this is how I think that you execute against Belt Slap, because right there, that's it's just a bunch of question marks for me. When you look at how this dual lane plays out, you know that first minion on the second wave gets you level 2. Trixtank can't step up and try and be the first one to hit. You know, he's trying to get that minion first. But even if he gets it, the level 2 for Kumbhakarna is not nearly as strong as a level 2 for someone like Kuzenbo. You know Kala started that sumo slam. Just a bad decision by Trix. It's an easy first blood for Freshly Forged. And now if Okeanos can start to use this lead and maybe start to find solo kills onto Arkil come level 5, that's where I think Freshly Forged are going to have to try and find their mark. If I'm Ice, I'm coming right on over to duo lane as soon as I think I've got a gank opportunity.
It's good, though, they've gotten some value out of this Kuzenbo first pick overall. Clearly comfortable on it is Collis. And, you know, that's a bit why I'm surprised by this pick. Collis has a wide god pool. He's shown us plenty of times the ability to play Fafnirs, Athenas, that sort of thing. I'm sure he could play some of the more current meta picks, too, like the Horus quite well, but clearly comfortable here on this Kuzenbo, and it's off to a good start. But now, taking a lot of extra damage with this minion wave, though, he should be able to make it back out of there A-OK, but just continued action over here on the long lane side.
Yeah, Arkell, nice and patient, doesn't dash in through those minions. I thought we might see it considering Kalas doesn't have a shell. He's got that blink instead, but Arkell stays at home, doesn't want to end up giving up more golden experience to the other side, but might as well try and get this invade off. But the clear for Kuzenbo is really strong on these buff camps. Being able to bounce that Kappa, just doing double damage basically from your base damage, really makes him pretty hard to invade.
Well, there's that blink you just mentioned, but a two-man Mez, the response from Trickstank, the EI Jutsu stun. Not quite there from Okeanos. To kind of leap over, though, towards the mid lane, we kind of been chilling the long lane all game long. What is it that really brought Raijin back into the meta so hard like this, aggro? I mean, for a while there, we weren't seeing him at all. His early game felt too weak, but now his late game almost uncontested, and we see him every game.
Yeah, he got a little buff, if memory serves. I think it was base damage on the 1 or something like that. It was a very small buff, but it basically turned his mediocre, lackluster early game, but great late game potential into good enough early game with still that phenomenal late game. And I think the big thing for this character is that people just kind of realize that Taiko Drums does dummy damage at level 5. Like, you don't need any extra points. You don't need any extra scaling. This is 4 shots coming from Taiko Drums of massive damage that you can just dump out and really fairly easily confirm more often than not.
Agreed. Hard to miss as Collis and Ice moving up into Johnny and Zeros, but Collis doesn't have an ult here and up against the level 5 and 6 of Belt, so that might not be the 2v2 skirmish that they were looking for. But yeah, it's hard to argue, I think, with Taiko Drum. Such a versatile ability. A lot of the times the right answer is just to kind of pump damage in, but there's tons of scenarios where the fear, the taunt can all be equally valid as well. There's just so many options, I feel like, for this Raijin. The Thunder Crash can be used aggressively too. Just a great kind of god, I think, right now for this current state of what you want your mid laners doing, which is scrapping and farming more often than not. Belt Slap, though, despite the fact they gave up that first blood, still relatively close in this game. That's about the only difference between these two teams, is that 300 or so gold between them. And Belt Slap don't seem pressed at all, quietly going about their farming and waiting for their next moment.
I mean, Belt Slap is a team that's really taken a lot of games to late game, and even in their very dominant run during the Phase 1 playoffs where they only dropped 1 game, I didn't feel like they were always super clean. I mean, they definitely had their fair share of mistakes and bad engagements and early deficits that really shouldn't have happened. So even though they had a nearly perfect phase, they dropped 1 game, all phase, playoffs included, I don't think that they look absolutely unstoppable every game. There are games where they look completely unbeatable and you scratch your head at, what could we have possibly done differently. But I think that this is a team that is vulnerable if you can get them in the right position. So I think that them waiting for a late game is not too surprising. I think we've seen it from them a decent amount.
Collis blink into the watery grave, and it's Trickstank they're trying to lock down. You mentioned the displacement of the supports. Doesn't do a whole lot here. In fact, now Collis is the one that's in trouble. Taiko Drum's first 2 shots are all off the mark, but Zeros is able to get there with the last few bits of damage, and Collis will drop to even up the kill total here in this game. And Belt Slap can do a bit more with that aggression, strip away some of this jungle, and get right back to farming.
Man, Ice lucky that Johnny decides not to check the speed timer. His Ice's speed is up a little bit earlier than Johnny's. Usually those buffs are in sync, and so that's why Johnny's not going to check, because his is down for a little bit longer, but Ice has been on top of that timer pretty consistently. And without checking it, they don't know that it was coming up and could have probably got another invade off, but just a bit of an overextension there by Kalas, who just really felt like he was going to do a little bit more displacement. I think he was trying to blink behind Trix and then Watery Grave him into the tier 1 tower, and then the CC chain can start. You know, Deathwalker is able to drop the Circle of Protection, stun, silence, pop the Circle of Protection for max damage, then you get the full execute off. But that would have required pretty much perfect execution on that blink in, and Trix was just a little bit off center from where Kalas wanted him to go.
All a bit high execution, it feels like, to make this work. That's part of why I don't know that I necessarily love Kuzenbo right now. I think the Watery Grave is a great tool, hard to mess up, but some of this other elements, you got to make sure you really are timing them well. It's time for the blink in, though, from Ice. Zero still had the Thunder Crash, does make it back out of there, doesn't have to use beads or anything else. So the small skirmish favoring Freshly Forged there just in terms of damage dealt, but not a whole lot gained in either direction, and that is Ice's blink on cooldown.
Yeah, personally, I think one of Kuzenbo's biggest weaknesses is that it's really hard to follow up on his CC as a mage. I mean, it's just so it's such fast displacement that you have to be really, really accurate in order to,
it's a little janky
land
too, right? Like,
yeah, they're kind of they move quick. You know, it's a little they're disjointed quite a bit. Following up on Watery Grave, I mean, bless up, that's impossible. Pretty much, it feels like, unless you got a massive AOE. But Sumo Slam, they basically have to put them into a wall to make it easy for you to follow up. Deathwalker's playing a character in Isis that actually does follow up on Kuzenbo pretty well, because Wing Gust is a very easy to move, you know, track ability. You're basically trace aiming that one, so I think that that combination makes sense to me on as a mage that can actually follow up on Sumo Slam properly in the midst of a team fight. That I like that pairing, but overall I think that Kuzenbo does a lot of displacement, but it's hard to follow up on.
I think this is tier strength, though, his ability to rotate into fights and lock down kills just like this. They've already gotten Deathwalker and Kalas low. Should fall. Good Watery Grave, though, makes it so no one can cast any abilities, and suddenly Zeros takes a bunch of damage from the tower. Crunchy gets that kill. Okeanos gets the kill into Johnny as well, and I wonder if only Kuzenbo can get out of that one with that big disruptive ultimate.
Probably. That's one of the strengths. We just talked about the weaknesses. There's the strength for you. That one works perfectly for Kalas. I mean, frankly, Zeros doesn't hit anything in the midst of that with the percussive storm. He's just got to land one of the three, and I don't think he hit one. But at the end of the day, it's because of how disruptive and in the movement that you get and how hard you are to lock down in those moments. That's one of the strengths of Kuzenbo right there. Even if they get that kill onto Kalas, I think that's still a great fight for Freshly Forged. They're trading mid and support for a couple kills on the other side, and none of them are the enemy support. So you're feeling pretty good about that trade either way. But especially when Kalas gets out of danger, you're loving it.
And 9 times out of 10, I think that fight is supposed to favor Belt Slap pretty heavily. I mean, Julio gets there ahead because he just is going to. He's playing tier with all this movement speed with the Talaria, the Relic Dagger. He's going to be building even more. Looks like we are going to be seeing this traditional tier build from him. And those early rotations to those mid fights, those fights around Pyro, that sort of thing, I think that's where a lot of the tier solo strength really does come from.
Agreed. It's really impossible to punish in lane because he just doesn't get CC'd for long enough. He gets so much free protection from his blue stance that you can just sit in it, and the heal is such a low cooldown and such a strong heal. It's impossible to beat this guy in lane, 1v1. He just does too much damage to the wave, he heals too much, and you just can't lock him down long enough to really kill him. And so then when he's able to rotate around, because you can't beat him in lane, there's no point in him sitting there. You're not going to be able to match what he's doing anyways, so he's going to out-clear you, and then he out-rotates you with all this movement speed. I haven't really thought of a way to counterplay it, and neither has any SPL team in my mind, because it's been pretty important for a lot of different teams.
Well, it definitely helps if you can't quite finish off that 1 HP Kuzenbo in mid, and you kind of let some things get away from you. But yeah, I think consistently it's going to be hard to slow down. No surprise, the Wing Blade is the next item. That's another part about this that's really tough to beat. It's cheap, isn't it? They're like $18.50, somewhere around there in terms of gold for Relic Dagger and Wing Blade. It is just not expensive to get to this point in the build where you just have so much health and movement speed that make you so effectively tanky and hard to kill.
Yeah, it's 600 health for like a little over, less than 4K gold combined between Relic Dagger and Wing Blade, and it's a ton of movement speed, and you love the passives on both. It's with all this movement speed, they think, okay, we'll just slow him, we'll Isis silence him, and then he just starts zooming even faster in between. I mean, Mr. Crunchy can't even lock him down for a second for some abilities because Julio's just moving too fast. He's race carring around.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that the build's incredibly fun as well. You get to it's not bad to have something to do at least. These solo laners, I think, have largely felt relegated over here to this side of the map and struggled to find ways to be impactful sooner. And I think this type of build path is one of those ways where these solo laners can get involved a bit later on. We have seen sometimes, I think, the solo laners with these builds kind of struggle a bit in the late game until they can kind of shift into more protections and kind of still do that same work. But it has allowed them, I think, to leverage their early game leads a bit more.
Exactly, and just like this, Julio's job, proxy, unpunishable, and now I just walk around and I see what's up on your side of the jungle. Oh, your XP camp is up. Cool. I'm going to put pressure on it, and now you're going to have to clear it on time every time, and that's going to take you away from farm elsewhere. We know your timer, so we'll see you on that camp, or we can guess that you're there, and we can make a Gold Fury play or a dual lane gank, or we just invade you on it with multiple people instead of just the tier.
Belt Slap now going to start the Gold Fury. It's yet another question which they dare Freshly Forged to answer. Down to half already. Ice Ice, Deathwalker, Collis, Okeanos, everyone near. So this will not go down for free. Collis leads with the Watery Grave. It does the disruption. Freshly Forged pick back up the Gold Fury. They've got the best secure with Circle of Protection, but now the objective has been leashed, so the Circle of Protection does very little. Deathwalker gets a bit of heal off it, and Johnny might have to disengage with this last swing, but Ice Ice falls in the backline. Zeros gets the necessary kill. A two-man Mez from Trickstank allows for a little bit more damage to come through, but Arc will use the Living Nightmare to track down Deathwalker off to the side. And now it's time for Julio to get a little bit involved, way in the backline, disrupting everyone, creating plenty of space, and Belt Slap can head right back towards the Fury.
No zeros. He had to back to base, but even with Arco having no mana, this front line is so potent here for Belt Slap that no way Freshly Forged can step up and contest this objective any longer. That was actually a sick play from Mr. Crunchy, because Julio was about to get a fat Fearless in the midst of that Gold Fury fight. He was going to pick up 2, maybe even 3, if Mr. Crunchy hadn't timed that Excalibur's Wrath perfectly. He picked him up out of Fearless and made it so he didn't displace Okeanos at all on that fight. Doesn't end up saving Freshly Forged team fight completely, but that was pretty sick timing there from the King Arthur.
Saves the fight for being what could have been a lot worse. Belt Slap still come out on top there, obviously, and grab the Fury, but certainly things could have gone awry. I don't know, there were a couple areas where Freshly Forged seemed a bit out of sync there as well. It's hard for Deathwalker, who we haven't talked a whole lot about here in the middle lane, instead of solo in his normal home, where I think he made a lot of that name for himself, but is playing in mid a lot more lately. Finding that timing for the Circle of Protection, I think, in that fight to try and maybe switch up to being the team that's on the Fury and burning that can be tough, and it seemed like they were a bit lost in what they wanted to do there.
Certainly it looks like a couple of new team problems, a team that is just getting used to each other and what they want to do on certain calls. I mean, that's a tough call to make in the midst of a team fight. That is not an easy one for sure there for Freshly Forged, but definitely not the ideal execution where we let it reset a little bit of HP and then we decide, oh, maybe we want this. I stun those, zeros, toast.
Should be in some trouble. The Watery Grave keeps him in that damage forever. Collis is able to find that kill. Now with the Circle of Protection, Deathwalker should be able to heal back up a decent bit. Not a bad fight there from Freshly Forged. It started with them pulling Trickstank underneath the tower. Didn't get a whole lot, but that's a 4-man Mez underneath the tier 1 from Trickstank. But who can follow up? Johnny blinks to the back line to look for Deathwalker, but has to evade. But Julio is here and fighting in between 5 and still standing pretty tall for my money, is able to get that kill into Deathwalker and reposition. But Ice Ice, they're all trying to make it to Johnny in the backline without that ultimate. They know they can lock him down. The knock-up is there, and suddenly Johnny has fallen to a fractured fight from Belt Slap in mid, ends up costing them.
Man, Arkhill just continues to shove. The man with the global ultimate, not super interested in getting over here anytime soon. A little bit lucky here for Freshly Forged that Arkhill decides not to push that Phoenix, because I think he could have gotten it with this hard commit onto the Pyromancer.
Pyromancer's low. Freshly Forged will grab it. Trickstank walks in, but is zoned effectively. But Freshly Forged has to be careful. Arkle and Zeros are both on their way. Okeanos has used his ultimate very early on this time, so he has already hit that object button. Makes me think Freshly Forged really don't want anything more to do with this skirmish, and that is correct. They've entirely gotten out of there after getting their Pyromancer, but as you mentioned, a ton of map pressure opened up on that left-hand side with that Phoenix exposed. You can tell that even with the way that fight went, Belt Slapper still out in the lead in terms of gold because of the extra farm too. Not bad at all.
I mean, Arkill, that's 2 or 3 times now that he's ulted and then just landed back down, provides the global slow, and hits the old dusty trail back to the duo lane instantly to go back and keep on farming. And Okeanos, on the other hand, has really done a good job of coming mid and making pretty impactful rotations. He's 2-0 because of those rotations, but it's not going to match 3-4 waves of solo farm that Arkill's getting on that duo lane side. So Arkill's up 2 levels, despite not having nearly as much map impact as Okeanos in terms of team fighting. Arkill's contributed more from the objective pushing that he's done. He's contributed a good amount of gold by getting those towers. But now, where is he going to be? Is he just going to start grouping with the team? Is he going to keep trying to do that push? It's a lot less safe now that he's got to be all the way near the Phoenix line in order to threaten an objective. Doesn't surprise me that he's just going to almost lane swap over here and start pushing onto the right side.
All right, it's the best side lane he can push now. He's already done it over there on the left, and it can always rotate over at any time. I love this Hide of the Urge. I don't know why I'm so fixated on the tier build here, but it's obviously what works so well with all that help. Just about as much protection as we could possibly get at this point in the game once he starts stacking that one up too. So it all makes sense. As Collis aggressive looks for zeros again, he has been the target, has to use beads early on. Deathwalker drops the circle of protection, does get some healing, but Bat out of Hell perseveres, cuts through it all, and Deathwalker falls early. Crunchy has found one more target, has Arkle up in the air, right into the push from Collis, but Arkle hides in the wall, buys tons of time, waits out all the damage, runs to the back, but Okeanos is there, cuts him down to size to make it 1-for-1.
Now Kalas delivered back, but not enough damage there for all of Belt Slap with Arkill dead and Zeros zoned out of this team fight. This is one that Belt Slap have to really disengage. And that was, and Arkill was kind of just down to take the ride there in the mid lane. He gets ulted by Mr. Crunchy, has the relics up the whole time, eats the whole ult, decides this is fine. I'll just get chopped to pieces midair by this King Arthur. Then gets pushed by Kalas. We're cool with that too. We're not using beads yet. We're gonna Aegis as soon as we're done getting pushed, and then we're gonna bead so we can jump in the wall. Got to use relics a little bit earlier than that. He was pushed so far out of position that it was never gonna work.
We like 2-man Fearlesses, though, to start the fight off. Not bad for Belt Slap here at all. That brings Collis down low and takes all thoughts of Freshly Forged trying to do this Fury off the table. So Belt Slap can now afford to back up. They had a lot of backs off that last fight, or some people who are still on respawn, so good work for that 2 front line to stop that objective push from Freshly Forged. But yeah, I mean, that's something to kind of go back to the relic usage. That's something that has plagued Arkle in the past a little bit, is that he's very, very patient on the relic usage sometimes to a fault, sometimes to a great boon when he still has them for a big fight. But now the Oni Fury being started up by Belt Slap, and it's Freshly Forged that to try and force their way in, but no one is local except for Collis, so the Oni Fury goes down for Belt Slap pretty easy.
It seems like Freshly Forged maybe split up a little bit too much there in order to start farming. Feeling like with Arkill back that they can't take this fight, but you know Arkill doesn't have relics in that spot. I mean, Deathwalker still had all of his. I feel like that's a little bit of an odd give up there from Freshly Forged. I think that's a Oni Fury that you can contest a little bit more than they did in that spot, knowing that no beads there for Zeros, no relics at all for Arkill. Even though you're down a little bit, Mr. Crunchy went solo lane. The couple people split backs. Ice was on purple. Farming's important, but I just don't know that that's the Oni Fury. You feel like you need to get up. You give up. You want to punish Belt Slap's carries for not having relics, and Freshly Forged just didn't find that opportunity.
So Belt Slap hold on to their momentum. It hasn't exactly been dominant from them. It's not just the kills that are relatively close here this game. I mean, the gold is only about 3,000 or so in their favor. Arkle does still have an experience lead over Okeanos because of the way the trade's been going, and his team is ahead in that category as well, about 5,000 experience for Belt Slap. But this one not out of reach for Freshly Forged, and their really strong objective engage could be a big difference maker as there's action in mid. Deathwalker gets locked down by Julio, but Circle of Protection should buy him some time. Epic uppercut, though, negates it by knocking him up and out of it. It explodes while he's still in the air, and Julio gets the kill credit. So Belt Slap now at the 5v4 can try and force down this tier 1.
I mean, that's the power of the Kumbhakarna. It's damage, it's CC, it's escapability, it's everything.
It's all that you could possibly need. Okeanos has to drop back out. He was in some trouble. His beads had to be used there as well. So Beltslap really got to be feeling galvanized at this point. No fight looks like a bad one. Julio considers the fearless. The threat is enough to force Freshly Forged back. So Beltslap gets the tier 1 and can now look to start a fight here around Pyro. I doubt they're ready for the FG just yet, but certainly Pyro.
Been a tough return to mid lane here for Deathwalker. He's 0-5 and below Trix on the player damage charts. It's a tough comp to play Isis into, but they pick it pretty late in the draft, so you have to expect that that's what he wanted. Hasn't worked.
Not a lot of good drafts for her, it feels like at times, huh? As the Taiko Drums from Zeros doesn't find a whole lot, and a difficult job for Deathwalker made more difficult by this Camazotz, I feel like, and its ability to dive him, the Kumbhakarna and the Julio's ability to stick to him, especially the tier, even with all that crowd control she normally uses for peel. Tier is just right there, fighting through it all. It's a tough task for Deathwalker here.
Oh yeah, this is an impossible draft to play mid lane into. I mean, you've got movement speed tier, Camazotz who's unpeelable, and then a Kumbhakarna that does almost as much damage as you and is also way tankier than you. I mean, I don't envy Deathwalker in this game for sure, but they saw the tier and the Camazotz before they made their mid pick. Don't know if Isis was really the one you wanted.
And Trix Tank made some awfully tasty bait there as Freshly Forged lock him down. Fortunately, they don't get punished, but Arkle is on his way. Julio goes right to the back line, and Ice has to use the ultimate just so he doesn't die instantaneously. Now he has to run for his life, but Deathwalker's still stuck between a rock and a hard place, and Johnny has plenty of damage at this point of the game. Deathwalker barely got to play Smite, and Johnny still had to bat out of hell to reposition to the back, so Zeros goes in aggressively with the Thunder Crash. He gets one kill, but trades his life away on the back end. Julio pins Crunchy up against the wall, and there's the damage from Arkle. Zeros' death, probably not necessary there, but they'll take the 3-for-1.
Well, where's the boys, Finch? Why are we? The mid laner finds the huge jump in. He finds 3. Trix had blink. Where are the boys to help out Zeros? I feel for my mans, dude. The front line got to help a brother out, as if he's gonna dive into 3. But hey, either way, sometimes your job is to die, even as the mid laner. In that instance, Zeros dying is totally acceptable because he takes all this extra damage, puts out every bit of damage he had in the kit, and allows Beltslap to come in and play cleanup crew very, very easily.
And that isn't an understanding about the mid-roll that I feel like Zeros has always had, which is that sometimes there's an opportunity for so much value out of your abilities that you kind of just have to take it, I think, and trust that your team's going to be there to follow up and maximize that opportunity that you created for him. And Zeros, I think, did that there, and they turned that momentum into a Phoenix. So certainly would be hard to argue with it based on those results.
Yeah, I mean, if you go in there and Trix blinks in right behind him and CCs and keeps them off Zeros as he kills Okeanos or locks down Okeanos so that Zeros can kill him without taking nearly as much damage, then it's, a super clean team fight and everyone is just pog champing about how awesome it is. But at the end of the day, you still got a 3-man mez, you still soloed Okeanos by yourself, still got damage off onto both frontliners. It's the risk that you take, and it's just good identification from Zeros, understanding that even if his team doesn't come in and help him the way that he was hoping, that it's still going to be a positive fight because he's going to be able to do so much.
Yeah, I think he only needed another half a second. If he gets to the Taiko Drums a little cleaner in that situation, like with more HP to him, then the control kind of buys him that additional space. So I think it really was that close to being the sick play that you sort of highlighted as the Fury ends up going down in favor of Beltslap there as well. Now 10,000 gold out in front are Beltslap with only a 4-kill lead here at this point. Freshly Forged, I think, did a decent job of trading with them throughout that mid-game aggro, but not really in terms of keeping up with the farm. Beltslap has sort of been steadily climbing away all game long.
It really felt like Freshly Forged was going to be in a position to make an upset potentially with that early kill onto Trix at level 1. The fact that Okeanos was rotating mid and helping out, but they were just never able to keep pressure on Arkle in this game, and I think that's where they really fell behind.
Fire Giant was low and dropped. Arkle uses the ultimate to get to the back line. Zeros has to use his ultimate early, but look at all the damage he puts into Ice. As soon as he lands from the epic uppercut, He should be damageable, but is able to get the leap off. It's Okeanos who falls instead. Deathwalker controlled by Julio, and there's so few options with the tier and the Camazotz are on you like this. Arco gets Collis. Julio takes care of Mr. Crunchy, and it's actually Deathwalker who lives through it all the longest, but the rest of his team falls around him as the Fire Giant started back up by Belt Slap and burned quickly. Julio is stunned and forced to give up the chase, but that's a dub for Belt Slap.
They're happy with this outcome for sure. This Fire Giant goes down. Zeros really had to play self-peel on that fight, Mr. Crunchy. He really had the 1v1 up against Zeros, but Zeros still able to contribute with a really nice Taiko drums. Just keep Ice CC'd, knowing that the damage doesn't really matter, because Arkill can put it out. You're not going to be able to burst him before he uses that ultimate anyways. It's just using that CC and locking Ice down so that Arkill can get that easy damage off. And then the great peel from Trix Tank on top of that to make sure that Ice really never was able to make a big play on this late game Kali.
Good use of the epic uppercut did keep Ice out. It's the right side Phoenix that falls now. Julio did more work to keep Ice zoned out on the back half of that little fight to guarantee the right side Phoenix would go down without any contest. They'll take Pyromancer back, and with that extra movement speed, they'll have plenty of time to kind of spin that gold, come back out and make another push. But really, there aren't even any other towers to go get. It's been such a clean game thanks to Arkel's push earlier on that left side Phoenix is already exposed, and they haven't even had to rotate over there and win fights on that side of the map. It's just an open Phoenix on the go get now.
And you're going to be able to walk up this mid lane fire wave as well. I mean, that's easy for Johnny to start pushing that mid wave, and maybe Julio as well, since he can rejoin that fight on the left-hand side so quickly. I think I'd like to see Johnny and Julio walk up this mid fire wave, try and get that mid Phoenix with that pressure, and the rest of the team just sit on over the left-hand side.
Arkel uses the Living Nightmare. They want to try and catch out Ice Baby, maybe force out the ultimate, even get the kill if they can lock it down. But this is all in service of their next wave of initiation. So Trixtank moves in with the epic uppercut, and that should be enough. Yeah, the epic uppercut was enough damage all by itself. Julio now has Deathwalker yet again pinned against the wall. Trixtank here to keep the CC chain going. The silence is good to buy time, and somehow Deathwalker has solved it all, but that left Okeanos alone to try and battle up against Johnny, and he has plenty of damage to complete the kill. Now they can look for the lockdown onto Crunchy in the back of the fight, but he retreats, gets back to the fountain. But this is the only place that Freshly Forged can fight from, is their own fountain, as Belt Slap proved to be too strong. And look at Zeros. He's solo pushing it left.
That never even was a factor in this team fight, and really wasn't needed. Mid Phoenix falls once again. Zeros still chunking away at left. Now decides he wants to add a little bit more player damage onto his tally.
Yeah, let me get some of these kills here as well, guys. Goes up with the Taiko drum. Too late for Crunchy, who's made his way back to the fountain. Trixtank lives through his own fountain dive, and this very well is looking like the end of the game. Belt Slap. It may have taken 30 minutes, but it felt pretty dominant. They will claim game one.
I mean, from the moment that Belt Slap started grouping, that game felt pretty over with right away. I mean, they just really grabbed control of that game through all the CC that they had. Julio was unanswerable in these team fights, and Zeros was able to put out so much more damage than Deathwalker was. And part of that is draft dependent, part of it is God dependent, but like I said a lot, I mean, Deathwalker picked this Isis late in the draft. Merlin's still open, Discordia still open. I mean, there were picks that are a little bit higher up on the tier list. You know, Poseidon, something like that could maybe give you a little bit of cripple help at knocking down Julio or Johnny. There aren't a lot of answers to movement speed tier or Camazotz or Kumbhakarna for mid laners. Trust me, I feel for him, but feel like this pick did not do Freshly Forged a whole lot of favors.
No, it felt like the whole draft was sort of high execution, right? It was such a narrow case when everything would go well for this composition to sort of work out. And think about that initiation we saw from Collis with the blink into the watery grave around their tier 1 early on in the game. That didn't quite pan out. That was a good example to me of just how narrow the situation has to be for this draft to really do what it wants to do. Plus, they never got to be the objective-focused composition that I feel like they would have liked to be either. Belt Slap just never gave them that room.
It's just too much mobility on the side of Belt Slap. You've got such great disjoints between the Camazotz leap and Trixtank just being wherever he wants to be in the midst of the fight. Johnny, I mean, he has that bat out of hell. Julio's all over the place. Zeros has a leap. Arkill can go into the wall. It's just mobility on every single character, and that makes it very hard, even with a heavy CC comp, to lock it down. And when your heavy CC comp is usually starting off with a Blink Watery Grave, that's really not going to do it. I mean, that's just not good enough setup. We need a Taunt or a Gebalt or something like that's really going to be easier execution than something like that Kuzenbo initiation.
Well, we're ready to move into those picks and bans for game number 2. I think that this was an area where there was some room for Freshly Forged to make some different choices. I really do not think Kuzenbo's got to be your first overall pick. I mean, there's plenty of other priority things you can take in that spot. Even if you don't necessarily love Camazotz for your own draft, you can make it so Johnny doesn't get to have it, something like that. Maybe take the tier. There's plenty of other options, I think, for Freshly Forged to make some adjustments in the P's and B's.
Agreed. Tier first pick, I think, looks way better. Camazotz, you mentioned. Even the Kali makes more sense to first pick overall, but sure. I mean, you get it later on, so it's not too bad, but it just feels like the prioritization for Freshly Forged wasn't really, exactly where you'd expect it to be, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, people who were trying to beat Belt Slap at their own game were unable to do so except for once through, 15 games last phase. So coming in with your own style, I think, is a pretty decent idea. I think it checks out, but maybe not that particular style. The other one. You know what I mean? Something different.
Well, Freshly Forged are going to ban away the tier this time, but there's just so much that you have to ban out right now. You have to worry about the healer, so Aphrodite gets banned. Nike Jungle has become a terror, so you got to ban that out. Sobek Solo is uncontestable and then hard to beat in team fights with all his disruption too, so I certainly get it with Freshly Forged feeling a bit hamstrung in the things they have to ban. But the Kuzenbo being hovered here yet again aggro, and I think that Collis played it fine. I don't think he played it poorly by any means. It's just that it feels like it makes the job a bit harder than it has to be from jump.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it got them first blood, and
that's right.
It lived that one time. That was cool. Yeah, that's all I got. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it's Kuzenbo inherently is a selfish pick for your Guardian, and that's a totally fine playstyle. You can absolutely carry games by being selfish as a Guardian, but if your strength for Freshly Forged is going to be your mid 3v3 cores, that's what we expect at least on paper. I don't think that this does a good enough job at setting up your 3v3 core, and that's my main concern. It's the synergy where that should be the biggest strength between Kalas, Ice, and Deathwalker, 3 guys who played for a long time together. Kuzenbo is just inherently anti-synergy, I feel like. It's just so hard to follow up on what he's doing.
Well, it's so funny how much they were willing to change from game 1 and yet insistent that the Kuzenbo piece of it was great, right? They're going to take away the Raijin this time, so that'll be on their side. They're banning away the tier, and they're going to pick a Hercules instead of the King Arthur this time to give them some aggression, and probably take it away from Julio. His tier and his Hercules are pretty scary if either one of them end up in his hands. But they insist on this sort of set piece of the Kuzenbo around all of that. So maybe this time we'll get a bit of a better look at what it was meant to do when some of the other pieces around it facilitate it more.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that it is surprising. If you're going to be willing to pick Raijin, you should be considering yourself very lucky that you get it in this slot, right there after the game that Zero's just had. But no harm, no foul, right? I mean, they get Raijin. If you just go Raijin first pick and then Hercules Kuzenbo, we're all feeling fine about the draft. So I'm not going to dwell on it because my mental state is too weak to handle that. So now I'm surprised that Freshly Forged aren't taking away the Discordia or the Merlin from Zeros, or the Kukulkan. He played a lot of that during Phase 1 and even into the playoffs. He looked very comfortable on that pick. Seems like they're trying to focus out Julio a little bit, which is understandable. I think Julio has likely been the most consistent member of Belt Slap so far this year, and that's been a real anchor for them. A really star-studded lineup. Julio kind of goes under the radar. I think you make the argument that he's been their best player because of that consistency, but Freshly Forged decided to try and ban him out and leave open some top-tier mid-lane picks. And Discordia up against Raijin and Hercules, I mean, that safety that she has from use of that ultimate and that long-duration CC immunity it gives you and the little bit of the leap that she has as well, I think is going to be pretty hard to lock her down.
Well, it's a pretty aggressive draft from Freshly Forged now that you add in this Vamana as well. Looking like Vamana jungle, I would say, at this point, to give them that dive potential. And I know that erratic behavior is good, but it's not the best tool in the world for escaping. So you could get locked down by a Mamana potentially. So this could be scary. They'll add in the Hachiman to this as well. We saw this last game. Okay, Nos looked fine on this one to me. No problems here. What do you think about this aggressive dash from Freshly Forged? Is that going to be enough?
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, this apple still concerns me. I think that Freshly Forged is going to be pretty grouped, and so that apple can be problematic for you. But I like the Vivana against Discordia quite a bit. Like you mentioned, you go into that erratic behavior, and then you've got this giant cone auto attack that you can just hit the whole circle with anyways, so it's not like that stealth really does her a whole lot of good. But she applies Divine Ruin very well. That's going to be problematic for Vivana and for Hercules. Camazotz applies Brawler as well. I think that this is going to be a draft that, again, it's a little bit high execution. I mean, it's great dive, but it doesn't feel like a particularly cohesive draft. It's just a lot of gods that are pretty good individually, not necessarily together.
And Ganesh is pretty good at the anti-dive, right? I mean, you love Dharmic Pillars for its ability to sort of separate the fight and really punish you for trying to break through the silence as well. So this could be potentially difficult. Plus, Julio has these executes, these normally really beefy frontliners that could be hard to do that last bit of damage against. The execute can kind of solve a lot of those issues. As Ice, it looks like, is starting on speed alone. Deathwalker not there just yet. He is going to walk by the outside, so I imagine he'll get some of that farm, but I'm a bit surprised that Deathwalker was not there. I guess he waited maybe to finish boots. We see that sometimes. I didn't see his start.
Yeah, it could be that early boot start. Wouldn't be too surprised, but Trix gets caught by the exact same trick that got him last time. Doesn't die quite yet, and Okeanos also takes a good amount of damage. But okay, here's where we see what we learned from game number 1. This is where you give up wave number 2 and you just let them push, because it's really hard to punish the enemy team just not pushing this next wave. This is exactly what you have to do as Belt Slap. Just sit right here, because it's going to be pretty hard for you to go and do this Alpha Harpy. Even if you do get this Alpha Harpy, it's not the end of the world. If the dual lane goes to get Oracles, like what Kalas and Okeanos are doing right now, then that's fine. And you have your mid jungle to contest if you want, or this makes Freshly Forged lose lane pressure. Guaranteed. So you're not giving up too much by just not dying wave number 2.
You got to think about what the ways are to punish. They're not great. Johnny has to use the blink. He gets a bit greedy, trying to look around and see what else is there in the jungle, but with that collapse, potentially he had to blink back out to maintain his safety. It was also, if you were following along with Deathwalker's start there, it was that lifesteal start as Kalas falls for first blood. He gets caught out there by the root meandering around and suddenly ends up falling.
And that's why you just give up wave number 2, because then Freshly Forged is in a really bad position. They have to waste time because it's a contest on Oracle, so they can't just use all their DPS at once. They have to try and secure. They do so successfully, but then they take a greedy path back into lane. They don't just allow the wave to go into tower. Same problem here for Okeanos. Doesn't allow the wave to go into tower. Has to beads the dash in from Trix. And now this lane is in a really bad spot for Freshly Forged, when last game it was in a great spot for them.
I think that's why Ice is making his way over here. He's got to do something, at least defend purple, because that could easily get invaded. And with Arkle and Trix tank relatively low on mana, there might be some gank potential. Meanwhile, Julio has Crunchy low in right with Johnny lurking, so there could potentially be action in solo too. Johnny heading towards cutting him off on the blue buff path, is going to see that he's there. Meanwhile, Kalas is getting aggressive over here on the left-hand side. Trix tank dashes to get back out of there, has the shell, trying to bait Ice back in, but they had enough damage to get the kill, so Trix tank will fall. But what about right? Johnny's getting aggressive around the blue buff invade, but the Thunder Crash from Deathwalker gets him the kill. Julio finds a two-man stun, at least gets the kill onto Crunchy in trade, but that's good action across the map for Freshly Forged.
Very, very smart by Ice to just be the aggressor on that left-hand side, and no one's expecting him to be right there at that purple buff. And then if he's already at the purple buff, I might as well go and invade theirs, especially once we see Johnny on that right-hand side trying to go for that blue buff invade. A good rotation in from Deathwalker. He's able to affect that fight as he should be able to before zeros, since it's on his side of the map. And that rotation from Deathwalker makes all the difference in setting up Johnny for that early kill. So now you set behind Trix a little bit, you set behind Johnny a little bit. Ice has gotten himself an early kill. There's a better start for Freshly Forged despite the early stumble over there in that duo lane.
It's so interesting the way that that dual lane can kind of break down, because there are some ebbs and flows to who has the pressure in the lane, even outside of which gods you have and maybe who should have it. You know, if your junglers show up, if you rotate off to look for farm elsewhere and it's not there for them too. So an interesting dynamic we've got to break down this time. But this is a great answer back from Freshly Forged. They really needed it, I feel like, to get that blue buff defended well on the right-hand side and to find that purple buff invade. You can see it in the charts as things are evened back up in terms of gold.
Still feel like Arkil has the opportunity to punish Okeanos if he's going to play that same way again, but Okeanos now has a lead because he's able to get that extra experience from the purple buff invade. Ice still here on this left-hand side.
And Trickstank is the one that's in trouble as a result of it, has already used that remove obstacles. So that should be a pretty easy cleanup kill for Ice. It absolutely is. I like the idea that they're trying to get aggressive on Okeanos without the beads, I think, there, even though he had the ultimate. If you could lock him down to silence, he wouldn't have the opportunity, but didn't expect Ice to still beat him.
Now Johnny's going to meet up with Ice, but still feel like this is a fight that Freshly Forged is pretty okay taking. Arkil uses that ultimate, but I think once he saw Kalas, he realized that fight wasn't going to be worth his time. Ice just camping duo, and like I said at the very outset, I think that this is the way that Belt Slap has looked the most vulnerable, is when you just put as much pressure as humanly possible onto this duo lane. I think that both Arkil and Trix have shown a propensity to play a little bit more aggressive than they need to at times.
Johnny still using the ultimate there at the tail end. I feel like he had time to recognize the ultimate was there from Okeanos and maybe not cast it, but it was really, really close, so no big problems there. At least make sure that he has to use it and force him to disengage. Now it's Julio that could be in some trouble on this right-hand side with Ice here. Finds the stun, and without the pull, Julio should be safe. He's back by his own tower. Ice just showing some presence. The blue buff is about to spawn. That can be there for this fight. Trick, Stank, Zeros, and Johnny, though, all nearby to try and help out, so there will be no blue buff invade or a pick on the right side.
And Ice just, kicking the tires, seeing what's up. Everyone rotates. Tricks and Zeros here on top of that. Cool. We'll back it up. No problem, man. We were just seeing if you cared that much about the blue buff. Belt Slap's there in force, and they back up in response. Ice is just doing a much better job this game of being a pressure generator on the map, and that's what you expect from something like a warrior jungle as opposed to the Kali jungle that he was playing last time. Kali's not there to generate pressure. She's there to capitalize on the late game power spikes that she's going to get. I think that Ice has played this pick pretty well so far and really put his team in a much better position early on in this game, where it looked like, and look, they were still even. It just looked like Belt Slap with that early start might be able to snowball this game out of control pretty quickly.
No, I think it's good that Freshly Forged slowed this down. They are in some trouble at the start of the game. I agree with you there. Take a look at Mr. Crunchy, though. It looks like he's going to be going that same build path we saw from Julio last game. Hercules can obviously do it as well, I would want to say, as we saw from the Tyr last time, though. Tyr's abilities are so hard to miss. I feel like it's so easy to do all that crazy juking around and still line up your abilities, whereas maybe you got to think a little bit longer. It might be a bit slower lining up things like the pull on Herc.
And he just has less abilities to use. One of the big things about Tyr is that he'll use the Fearless combo, and then he'll switch stance and he can use another dash, whereas Hercules, you use your one dash aggressively, and then you hope you don't die before it's back up again, and that's a pretty big problem. But the core idea is still the same. Hercules clears quickly and is hard to punish, so we can just immediately run around and use our displacement, use our movement speed to get in a position where our displacement is more impactful than it would have been if I couldn't just make a little semicircle behind the enemy.
Collis blinking. They were really trying to see if they could find Johnny, but even without the kill, they have zoned him off the speed buff, so the invade's successful, but how do you get everybody back out of here? Dharmic Pillars are trying to slow them down, but good use of the Watery Grave from Collis, so he doesn't have to care about the slow. Now, at this point, Freshly Forged have found the speed buff, and though it cost them some ultimates, they're out of there for free.
Not a problem whatsoever. I mean, Belt Slap just seemed to have no idea who they were hitting in that moment. No cohesive call whatsoever on who the target was. Ice, he's pretty hard to lock down, so they let him go out the back door in between Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower. But the ultimate from Arkil is late to see where everyone is, I think, and maybe he could have joined that fight a little bit earlier. If you just use that ult as soon as Deathwalker jumps, he's slowed. Now he has to beads or uses Tycho drums for CC immunity, and we just immediately use that slow to set up Dharmic Pillars from Trixtank, who's dashing in. Feel like that was just a bit of a miscall there from Belt Slap, or no call at all on who they wanted to hit. They just wanted to hit someone, they just couldn't decide who.
Good timing, though, for Freshly Forged to at least find that speed buff invade and kind of put Belt Slap in a bit of a tough spot. You mentioned it earlier. Now that Freshly Forged have this Vamana as opposed to the Kali, it feels like they're getting to be the ones that get to pose the questions a little bit more reasonably. Ultimate from Zeros, I think with the slow there, he wasn't quite sure if he was under more trouble than he was, and you just got to make sure you're getting away. But Ice Ice gets a big win there by forcing that Discordia ult out for free.
Yeah, I don't know why Zeros was so scared in that moment, though, because he had eyes on everyone else on the map. Deathwalker and Kalas were clearing mid wave. Mr. Crunchy was clearing solo wave right in front of his whole team. So maybe he felt like Ice could solo him in that position. I mean, Ice is pretty strong right now, but I think that was maybe a bit of an overreaction there by Zeros.
Yeah. Erred on the side of caution. Zeros tends to, I feel like, in the middle lane sometimes. He'll try and get himself out of there. You know, we saw, who was it that had the great Jormungandr game the other day out of the solo lane? I think that was Ducky. I was wondering if there was a chance we might see Zeros bring out the Yorm mid here again, but he's back on the Discordia, not up to the old tricks here necessarily, as we saw before. But look at Ice Ice way behind Belt Slap. This could potentially be trouble, especially if Okeanos pulls in a couple members, but nothing there. Instead, now Ice Ice is the one getting locked down. Big damage from Johnny, and the silence means that it's all going to hit home. Devour finds the kill, and suddenly Ice Ice punished for that excursion instead of setting up something possible.
Dharmic Pillar slows Deathwalker, and here comes Johnny right around the side. Great apple from a distance, and Deathwalker nowhere for him to go. Trick's in a bit of trouble underneath the tower, but that's exactly who wants to be in trouble. Kalas gets eviscerated. The 3v3 core of Freshly Forged was just removed by an apple core, because that's what removes cores, I suppose. Easy for Belt Slap to find those 3 kills.
Yeah, and easy for you to execute that pun. Yeah, that was clearly perfect.
Line up, baby.
I feel bad for Ice. I liked the flank from him. I thought that there were all these opportunities before him with that great positioning. No one knew that he was there, but instead he just gets isolated. And this is why I think the Ganesh pick was so smart from Belt Slap. They got it right before the secondary ban phases, but it's so good, I feel like, at punishing these warriors who normally can get away with being super greedy with their positioning. Instead, he kind of forces you to commit to that for an extra second or two more than you want, and that's all the time it'll take for a good team to punish.
I'm telling you, man, I think Ganesh is so undervalued. I think that character is just really, really good for situations just like that. I mean, any other Guardian in the entire game doesn't kill Ice Ice in that spot. Because even if, we're talking some of the longer CC chains you can have at this point in the game, we Sylvanas ult him into a max range pull or something like that. Ice Ice probably just ults and walks out. That long duration silence that's so easy to guarantee is just impossible to play against if you're Ice without beads. Until you get beads, you're holding that. You're just walking for that time period, and that's just not going to be enough to get you out of danger like he was in.
Ends up falling. That's a pretty critical pick that Belt Slap were able to find. They've really turned the game's tempo back around in the other direction here. As a result, I mean, Freshly Forged has started doing a lot of things right. Now there might be more trouble as Ice Ice gets locked down in the silence again. The execute lands. Might not even have needed it with the ultimate there from Trixtank, the Dharmic Pillars as well. But still another pick, and that's Ice Ice, who started 2-0-0, now suddenly 2-2-0, showing you why this momentum kind of swinging back the other direction.
And now he's going to lose his back harpies. I mean, Belt Slap has really just been very, very impactful in this mid-fight, in this 3v3. And it's really been a lot of it thanks to Trixtank. He's got 5 assists so far. You compare that to the 1 assist from Kalas. I mean, only 3 kills for Freshly Forged, but this first pick Kuzenbo continues to just not have the impact that I think Freshly Forged are hoping for.
And the Pyromancer now going down as well for Belt Slap, so things get a bit worse for Freshly Forged. And with this Fury up, I wouldn't be surprised if Belt Slap want to go starting to force some fights over there. Look at this build path here from Ice Ice. He's got a couple of tier 1s that he's working on. I wonder if this is just because he's been forced back with those inopportune deaths and he's wanting to try and get some value out of the gold.
I suppose so. I mean, Katana, it's 700 gold for 10 power and 3% movement speed. That's not great. Short bow, I believe that's 650 for 15% attack speed. Also not great. This is not gold efficiency. I'll tell you that much. I mean, you're not feeling like you're really popping off here with this efficiency. I think tier 2 Katana is only 700 more. I think it's 1400 for tier 2. So if you have the 650 there for short bow, you can sell the mana pot and wait for 10 gold. That's that's 2-3 seconds in base and end up with Katana 2. Maybe he feels like he needs Atalantas or Ichabal or something like that, but then why buy the Katana? I don't know. It's odd and certainly not optimal to go this way.
Not so. I think in some other games, a little bit more optimal at times to kind of buy these tier 1s, but here for us, it's rarely the right call. So I trust Ice, so I'm sure he's got his reasons for it, but hard to identify here. As I thought we might be seeing some action around this Gold Fury happening up, but instead they've been able to get these picks, Belt Slap I mean, have been able to find these picks lately, so I don't know they necessarily need to force these fights around the Fury. Freshly Forged got this lead that they initially had off of Ice and Kalos being able to kind of step out of position, being able to find this displacement and then stick to some of these targets. But now, in this mid-game more portion of the game, they have been getting punished for those same excursions. Now that he's got the beads online, though, Ice should be a bit safer, I feel like, to do those same trips.
It's huge for Ice to get those beads because this Ganesh has really been,
wow, he is rushing Atlantis.
A problem. And now he's going to have an option whenever he gets locked down. Gets a little bit of extra attack speed now. Guess he's going to come back to that Katana later on. Maybe get a Stone Cutting or a Masamune. I can't imagine you're going to go Atalantas and Hasten. Don't think you really need a double dip in that same vein of movement speed. But I think that this is where Freshly Forged have to make sure that they're not giving up objectives to Belt Slap. And Belt Slap's in a position where they can just use his Dharmic Pillars and in the lead that they've gotten to probably burn that Gold Fury more quickly than Freshly Forged is going to be ready for.
Should be the time in the game when they're feeling pretty good about trying to force these fights right about now. I'd be thinking here for Belt Slap. I wonder if Ice was thinking they didn't have time to wait on like Hastened and he wanted to swap over to Atlantis. I don't know, man. It's hard to think of what the call here is. It's 300 gold cheaper, the Atalantas, than the Hastened, and it does give him that attack speed, some power too, and he felt like he could get that online a little bit sooner and he really needed it. You're right, he was on the tier 1 already,
gold built into the Katana, so I don't think that necessarily works as well as he would have wanted to. Yeah, I don't know. I got nothing for you, man. It's just a weird... Sometimes player brain takes over and you just do some weird stuff. You feel like you need this right now. You can't stand the thought of losing the 300 gold by selling Katana. You know, that just boils your blood, so you refuse at a human level to give in to the item shop that way.
Deathwalker gets caught. I wonder if the Thunder Crash was taken. He still got it, able to get away from Julio, desperately needed in that spot. The Fury did go down to Belt Slap a moment ago. That's the first big neutral objective of the game that's been claimed for either team, and this is problems. They all had to walk through the Dharmic Pillars. Trickstank in the front line sets up for Arkle to get the damage they need on Okayanos. Deathwalker in trouble, does manage to avoid getting hit by that execute as Julio's brought back underneath the tier 2, but they're happy to take the fight. Johnny goes to the sky with his ultimate. Shell buys them some extra time, but he sustains up, gets the help from Julio that he needs, and Deathwalker drops as well. The tier 1 tower, which was still up when they dove the tier 2, has now fallen. Now they'll get the tier 2, and Belt Slap at this point essentially doing whatever they want.
Man, I just, you look at the itemization here for Freshly Forged, both Okeanos and Deathwalker go with the upgraded shell instead of the Aegis. I thought that I got my teams mixed up because it must have been Freshly Forged against the Vamana, but it isn't. They just decided they want that shell instead of the Aegis. Maybe it's because Aegis not great against Bat Out of Hell. It doesn't last long enough, and you can still get hit by all 3 swoops if you use it. But it's so important against Discordia ult that I can't imagine that this is the right call. I mean, Discordia ult is so backloaded on damage, and if I see this and I'm zeros, I'm stoked, man. I am so excited that my ultimate is always going to pop on these backliners. Maybe one of them having the shell I can understand, but it doesn't stack. You'd have to have one of your carries use the shell, have it fall off, and then use it again for the other one. I just don't see the benefit of having both here for Freshly Forged. I really don't.
Trickstink uses the Dharmic Pillars defensively here up against Ice Ice. That ultimate from Zeros ends up hitting nobody. I think if Trickstink locks down the 3 the way he'd hoped, that connects every time. So I like Zeros' willingness to follow up. But this experience deficit now, Ryan, it's out of control, man. I mean, this dive potential for Freshly Forged is all but gone. 13,000 experience. If you look back at the levels, there's a 3 to 4 level gap between the jungle and the solo lane, and that's not the only spot where they've got troubles. Mid and support are behind too. So it's not Freshly Forged with the Hercules, Wamana, and the Kuzumo that are diving. It's Beltsnap now with Julio and Johnny. Look at the player damage charts the next time they're up. It is Julio and Johnny, and no one else really seems to matter all that much. Beltsnap are doing the work.
Yeah, this one is going to be really difficult to come back from now if you're Freshly Forged. Beads by Ice, and Johnny still has that ultimate. Decides not to use it right away, but will eventually commit to the chase down. But why chase the Vamana when there's a nice, tasty Raijin in the jungle all by himself?
He does use the Taiko drums, but there's too much follow-up from the rest of Beltsnap. He dies during it, and Johnny survives easily. Good ultimate from Zeros lands onto Ice Ice. He can't survive it. Aegis used by Zeros to buy time, and even though he dies, he's done plenty of work. The commitment from Freshly Forged was too heavy to get the kill onto young Zeros, and that means the rest of Beltsnap can clean up easily. The boulder negligible at this point as Beltsnap continue to push down this mid Phoenix. Is there a chance this is game on the back of that?
Yeah, that's game. I mean, they've got a minion wave coming. No one coming up for 15 seconds. That should be game 2 pretty quickly here for Beltsnap.
Crunchy does get the push-pull onto Julio that brings him back into the fountain and does a lot of damage to him, but the whole time Arkle should be able to just put damage on the actual Titan. This is slow going without Zeros here to help. Titan only at half HP, and the backup is now coming for Freshly Forged. Crunchy, I think, might have done enough there by keeping Julio pulled away. The Titan was running from the whole time, and now Freshly Forged are back up.
That's good enough for the defense, but I don't know about the reinitiation necessarily. You feel like this should be a good fight with your whole team here, but this experience deficit is large.
That's a huge driving strike from Crunchy, though, and even with it, it's just absolutely not enough. Johnny gets a double kill, and Ice Ice doesn't even get to be a part of the fight. Goes up into the bat out of hell, gets the first swing. The last one he puts onto Okeanos in the back and wants to take the fight. He still has Devour, but a great knock-up doesn't allow it to come through. Julio does eventually get the kill on Collis in the back line, but Beltsnap's still hugely favored in that fight.
Gotta love Johnny. 2 swoops down, turns around, sees Okeanos literally just standing there and goes, yeah, why not? Let's see what I can do. Nearly found the clean 2v1 all by himself, but just a little bit short. Some good CC by Ice Ice and Okeanos at the right time. But really all Freshly Forged do right there, Finch, is delay the inevitable. Their Titan tankier than I had initially given it credit for, because the many towers, still 3 towers up on the map, and I think that might have caught Beltsnap off guard a little bit as well. But those towers aren't going to stand for long, and frankly, neither is the Titan.
Not at this point. I mean, I'm going to give Johnny some credit. There's a certain intoxication that comes with being an ahead Camazot. It always feels like you can outplay your opponent in any fight with all that sustain that he has in his kit. But the 1v2 there, having already used Bat Out of Hell, too ambitious, perhaps, but as you said, certainly not going to actually hurt Beltsnap's chances, I don't think, in this game. They're so far ahead. They now have Fire Giant and Primal Fury and can take care of those towers, as you mentioned earlier, to open things up, and Deathwalker in a whole heap of trouble. The apple from Zeros will not bounce in and find a target, but Arkle's Living Nightmare closes the gap. Okeanos stuck in a bad spot. The ultimate from Julio a little bit early, but that just means Arkle gets a double kill and keep up the chase. Johnny now battling Ice Ice in the Colossal Fury, and it's still not particularly close. Ice Ice does get some decent healing out of it, but Johnny should be able to clean this up easy peasy. And with the remaining 5v2, Beltsnap can just go take care of this.
Collis and Mr. Crunchy pushing up mid wave, trying to get rid of those fire minions, but yeah, this one is all over but the crying. Freshly Forged, I mean, look, this team struggled all last phase. I think that losing fails in Pretty Prime is certainly a tough blow to take. You get Deathwalker and Ice Ice and Colossus here in the 3v3. Deathwalker still clearly needs some more time to adjust back to that mid lane. And frankly, I don't know that we've seen enough great play from Ice and Kalas in their traditional roles up until this point to make me think that Freshly Forged really has a shot at the top of the standings, even when Deathwalker does get comfortable. Maybe the time has passed for those guys to be on top, even at the SEC.
Maybe so. I mean, this belt slap squad is pretty hard to beat. But to your point, Freshly Forged have struggled even when they're not up against the best of the best at times. So it does look a bit pessimistic, I would say, for them. Ice, though, had a great start to this game. I don't want that to be sort of lost. But he just ends up getting punished on a couple of really deep dives, trying to make the most out of that lead for them on that Vamana off some great plays from Trix, who I think had a really good set here this time, especially game 2. And that was enough, man. Belt Slap only need a small crack for them to start clawing their way back into it.
Yeah, I don't know if Deathwalker just doesn't want to go back to solo, but it feels like if there's going to be an avenue for you to get towards the top of the standings, it's probably to put Deathwalker in solo and see, Mr. Crunchy can go mid or if you can pick up a different mid laner. Now that Mr. Crunchy was the whole reason that they struggled today, but Deathwalker certainly did, and we know that potential in solo lane, though. I don't know. It's kind of inexplicable, the journey for Freshly Forged. Remember, they barely qualified into the SEC during the open bracket qualifiers at the very beginning of the year. And it just seems like the break between Phase 1 and Phase 2 hasn't exactly done them a whole lot of favors.
And Kalas, Deathwalker, and Ice, man, they've earned a lot of the benefit of the doubt, in my mind for sure. That run with Rival, one of the best runs I think a team has made ever across that 2-year period. They were so consistent.
Agreed.
They had 2 Worlds runners-up back-to-back, right? So, I mean, obviously this is a really strong team, but we are starting to see that maybe they're not quite at that same level here right now. They don't have those same pieces with them. It's obviously not the same scenario, but you want to see them get back to that same spot. So we did just take care of the Freshly Forged belt slap game. We'll be seeing the Cold Llamas and the Poppies playing later on after the SPL here tonight. That'll be the same for Sunday. We'll have the first game in the morning, Basking the Boys and Hype-Un, and then we'll get to see the amateur casters take care of those second 2 games for us after 7 and 8:30 today. After the great job they did across the playoffs, you're going to want to make sure that you tune in to check out those games as well.
Definitely, and especially for the Cold Llamas game later on today, Prime and Fails left the Freshly Forged team, went to Cold Llamas. That's going to be a fun team to watch, man. I think that's going to be a team that you have to look at as a team that might be able to eventually compete with Belt Slap. May as well be there tonight right after the SPL to see their first foray into the competitive scene with their new roster.
That's right. They still have Hazer in support, I think, for that roster for Cold Llamas, if I could trust that. So you love to see him playing at any time. Great coach for a long time and certainly an excellent player there as well. So there's plenty to see from the SCC in terms of the play itself and obviously the great commentary that you'll be getting to go alongside that as well. So make sure to check it out. We're going to be laid up to the SPL before too long here. We're about 45 minutes out from that at this point too. So you're going to want to make sure that you stick around to enjoy that when it gets started back up here. But we're competitive at every level. There was a while there, Ryan, where we were hearing some calls about Belt Slap and maybe they should step up and see how they would play in Obey's spot. But I think with the way that Obey has turned things around, that has put a lot of that conversation to bed, man. You don't want to miss any SPL games at this point because anybody can win.
Agreed. No doubt that in my mind that Obey is without a doubt better than Belt Slap right now. As good as Belt Slap looks at times, Obey's doing it against the best of the best in the world. And I don't know, that argument has always rubbed me the wrong way in every sport ever. Like, Alabama will never, ever